Hello, everyone. I'm Marjorie Balingit, and I'm the Innovation and Planning Coordinator from the CCSA. And I'm here to present to you how to build your workplace violence and harassment prevention program with evidence-based tools and resources. So we have known this for years. Assaults, violent acts, or harassment remains one of the top 5 types of injuries or accidents reported to WCB in both long-term care and senior supportive living industries. So there's a high cost related to that if you're looking at WCB premiums from the lost time claims. And we already know that, but we will look at the numbers. And between 2018 and 2022, violence-related injuries in both industries had grown an annual average of 22% combined. While violence-related injury has increased in both sectors, violence-related injury within senior supportive living has grown by 122% since 2018. So senior supportive living workers are becoming more injured more frequently now than they were in the past. And over the last 5 years, if you see the trend here, the growth overall for the combined industries is 108%, since 2018. And what is even scarier or more scary is that for every 100,000 FTEs work in construction, the WCB accepted 13 workplace violence claims. However, if you compare that with the same amount of hours worked in healthcare, the WCB accepted 802 workplace violence claims. And this was back in 2016 when the United Nurses of Alberta released this information from their news bulletin. So it is alarming because if you follow the trend, if you're following the trend, which there was a 108 increase since 2018 to 2022, then this would be a very, very high number now. And also, if you also think about the unreported cases, then that's even a higher number. So we'll just quickly look at the background behind why you have to create your violence and harassment prevention program. And this one we all know by heart, I hope, that according to Alberta OHS legislation, violence and harassment are workplace hazards, and we must develop violence and harassment prevention plans. And according to the OHS Act, we basically need to protect workers so that they're not subject to violence and harassment. And just quickly looking at all those sections of the OHS code, they outline these requirements. And these are most probably what you have in your organizations. So if you have the basics, then do you think those plans, policies, and procedures you have are working based on that, on the numbers that we have seen? Maybe not. Also, accreditation standards, it is a required organizational practice. And an ROP, and this is what they look for when you're going through that audit. You must have those policies and procedures and risk assessments in place, and you must protect the workers from all sources of violence. So we're more aware of the resident to the worker violence, but we have to also protect the workers from criminal intent. So type 1 violence, which is more external, the perpetrator has no relationship, worker to worker, and the most overlooked domestic violence, which trickles down to the workplace. And the CSA group, or the Canadian Standards Association, they also outline how important it is to assess the risk of violence in different settings and targeting interventions based on the identified risk, which results in positive change and lower worker injury rate, regardless of the intervention, as long as you're doing your hazard assessment and risk assessment and control. Another thing that's related to violence and harassment would be psychological health and safety. And one of the 13 psychological health and safety factors actually says that you should have psychological protection for your workers and make efforts to prevent harm to workers from harassment, bullying, discrimination, violence, or stigma. We are also using the PDCA model because we all know the OHSMS is patterned over the PDCA model, and we want to make sure that we are using that in creating our programs and processes and promoting change to the organization. And violence and harassment prevention program is just part of the overall OHSMS. So what are the 5 steps? So these are the 5 steps. We're going to look at it one by one. What are the activities that you do? What are the strategies that you should have when you do the 5 steps? So step 1, of course, you're following the PDCA model, plan the program assessment process. And this is mostly the planning part. And you want to make sure you're securing the leadership commitment first. You identify the stakeholders and create that buy-in and create a workplace violence prevention committee. So there should be a strategic plan that's implemented and shared with everyone that places an importance on the workplace free of violence. You have goals and targets set, and what are the activities that you are going to look at towards those, so that you can monitor your progress towards those targets. And I think the most important part in this step is making sure that leaders understand their overall responsibility and accountability. And then your step 2 would be risk assessment. So you want to identify the hazards and determine the risk rating. And you're probably doing something right now in your formal hazard assessment, but this one is more detailed and more geared towards the violence and harassment because it's kind of more comprehensive. So a strong workplace violence prevention program should include a comprehensive risk assessment and a plan to reduce those risks. And to develop a successful program, it is essential that workers, employers, health and safety committee representative, and unions. So I'm emphasizing the unions because if you do have unions, then they must participate and cooperate to identify and assess the risk in the workplace. And then step 3 would be developing the program components. So ensuring that there's a comprehensive program. Like I said, you should use tools and processes, resources in order to design that workplace violence prevention program, because you do have the basics, but now you have to focus more on what are the 3 Ps. So these are the 3 Ps: your prevention, protection, and post-incident response. So prevention is mostly involving strategies undertaken prior to an incident. And then protection would be focusing on strategies undertaken during an incident to manage workplace violence and limit the extent of harm. And then your post-incident response would be strategies that are undertaken after an incident has occurred to reduce the long-term negative effects on the victims. So you can see here on the slide some examples of those strategies, and it goes much deeper than your basic policies and procedures. And it is dependent, it depends on step 2, which when you were assessing all the various risks that are present in your facility or your organization. Step 4, of course, is implementing that program. You have created that action plan. So now you're looking at each detail in the action plan or each step, or so that you're assigning it to someone and making sure the timelines are still accurate, and you're creating communication and marketing strategies in order to share information to staff. And also you must have education and training that should be mandatory and incorporated to the orientation and regular education programs. Step 5 would be evaluating the program. So an organization cannot evaluate the effectiveness without measuring the indicators. So your indicators can be your leading and lag should be from qualitative and quantitative resources and includes leading and lagging indicators. And it is important, it is vital in guiding program improvement. Because we want to determine the program's effectiveness and highlight opportunities to enhance the program. So making sure that you have that goal for evaluation to create and maintain a safe working environment without the threat of violence, and then reviewing and revising and enhancing the program to improve the program components. Okay, so that was a quick overview. There's much more detail to it, but the most important part of this presentation would be the tools and resources. And it's very exciting to share to you what we have. So we do have the Violence, Aggression, Responsive Behaviors Toolkit. So these are the tools within our program. And a little bit of background: on May 15, 2017, the Ontario Ministry of Labor released the Workplace Violence Prevention and Healthcare Leadership Table report. So this report provided recommendations from across the continuum of healthcare. So they included long-term care, supportive living, home care, community care, emergency medical services, acute care. So all the works, they got together and produced this report, and they have recommended the use of PSHSA, or Public Services Health and Safety Associations tools, which are evidence-based, to provide workplaces with a consistent, scalable, and consensus-based approach. And these toolkits were designed for use in hospitals, long-term care, home and community care, emergency medical services, to protect those workers most at risk of workplace violence. And it's not just nurses, because sometimes we focus too much on nurses. It also includes nurses' aides, other allied healthcare staff, community and social service workers, and visiting home care workers. So CCSA has adapted these violence and aggression prevention tools and resources for our members in the Alberta continuing care and senior supportive living industry. So we're going to go quickly with each. So I'm going to talk about each tool a little bit, but we will be focusing more on the first 5 tools. And starting with the violence and risk assessment tools. So before I go to that, I would actually share to you how effective these tools are. So according to this slide, there was an evidence-based evaluation of the 5 violence, aggression, and responsive behavior. So that's the VARB toolkits. That was recently completed. So just 2019, they've released that final report based on their evaluation to better understand their awareness, use, and effectiveness. And the tools are having a positive impact on how healthcare organizations prevent and manage workplace violence, with 89% reporting that the use of the tools improved their processes, programs, and systems. And actually, just recently, last May of 2022, the Journal of Nursing Administration, or JONA, has published a paper by a large US healthcare system provider. They actually examined the efficacy of patient violence risk assessment tools. So they have various tools that they were testing, and PSHSA's violence assessment tool, which is included in the toolkits in the individual client risk assessment, was rated the highest of those reviewed. So it's the most effective. And the project team actually recommended the violence assessment tool as an instrument to be used across their care continuum within their healthcare system. So that's their recommendation. So we can clearly see how effective they are based on the evidence. So we'll start with the Workplace Violence Risk Assessment Toolkit. You can see here they grouped the hazards into 3 categories. The physical environment, which is kind of more for the whole, it should be completed for the whole organization, including common areas. Hazard category 2 would be department or unit specific work settings, so grouping that hazard. And then category 3 would be the direct care of potentially aggressive responsive residents. So what are the activities that might lead you to or might provide that higher risk for violence when you're caring for potentially aggressive residents? So it should be completed in units or departments where client care is provided. So just a quick look on how the tool looks like. So this is the form. And you can see here they put in the action or the task, and then what are the hazards and some examples, and then the degree of risk you'd have to choose based on what it is for your organization, and whether it be in a particular department. And then controls. It will list some controls and the potential solutions. So you'll just have to choose which is the most applicable to your facility. And then the other tool, which I said was rated in the US as one of the most effective or highest, would be your violence assessment tool. It provides a snapshot of a client's immediate risk of violence by identifying behaviors associated with increased risk. So this can be used, of course, for our industry, long-term care and senior supportive living, and we have adapted that, and should be completed at first contact with the client. So in long-term care and home care or community care, supportive living, it might be prescribed, it might be between prescribed ministry documentation such as RI MDS. So it will be used along with your ministry documentation, which is your RI MDS and RI Healthcare. And then we do have that flagging program or flagging handbook, which communicates the risk of violence. So they have defined that flagging is a standardized method of communicating safety-related concerns to workers. And unlike Code White, which notifies workers of violent situations, flagging, on the other hand, draws the attention to the potential of violence. So it is a proactive approach to managing the VARB, violent, aggressive, and responsive behaviors. And it involves exchanges of information that consists of visual or electronic cues easily recognizable by the healthcare team. And this handbook provides practical tools and information that will help organizations develop that sustainable flagging alert program. And it also supports the workers' right to know about potential hazards. Okay, the fourth tool would be your security toolkit. And assault, bullying, vandalism, theft, and property damage are unfortunately realities in today's workplaces, and requires employers to take every precaution reasonable in the circumstances to protect employees from violence and harassment, whether the events originate from strangers, clients, visitors, coworkers, or the crossover of domestic violence. So security is an important part of any workplace violence prevention strategy, but it doesn't mean that it involves hiring security personnel. For smaller organization, regardless of your size or sector, you should have a formal security procedure, and then you should recognize the importance of security, identify security program needs, gaps, and strengths, and develop and implement a comprehensive program, which could be ensuring that roles and responsibilities for security functions, so not necessarily security personnel or staff, but you do have security functions, and this entails activities that are assigned and supported by training. So that's what this toolkit would be providing. And this is one of the examples of the posters for included in the toolkit. So safety and security is everyone's responsibility. And you have what are the things that you are supposed to know and trained on in that security protocol. And the last of the 5 tools is Personal Safety Response System Toolkit. So it is designed to help community and healthcare organizations establish an effective system that can effectively summon immediate assistance for impending workplace violence situations or an incident in progress. So you might pick it up as communication devices, but it's more than that. So it's the system, policies and procedures around that. That's kind of what is included in this toolkit, which could be very beneficial because we sometimes we do have the device, but what do you have to do in order to cover and protect the workers the best way possible using the communication devices? Or if you don't have communication devices, what are the steps that you have to follow to summon immediate assistance? So the following tools are actually coming soon on the website. So these are more on the protection piece, not the prevention piece, so protection and also post-incident response, which I think is valuable for our frontline workers because Code White, again, is used in many healthcare settings to alert workers to a real or perceived threat of violence, which includes aggressive or responsive behaviors. And it provides resources and information on the effective practices that can be incorporated into your existing policies and procedures. So making it more robust than what's basic. And then your work refusal and workplace violence toolkit. So again, working on that legal right to refuse work or refuse to do particular work that endangers your workers, such as situations of workplace violence. And also workplace violence during care transition, because care transition is an important part of the continuum of care, and it involves moving the care recipients or our residents between sectors, locations, and it is a higher risk for our workers for violence because it is a stressful time and a vulnerable time, and there's fear and uncertainty. And that can quickly lead to residents or care recipients to act violently towards healthcare workers, which are also not familiar with the person. So it's just providing us with those information, the sound practices for planning a course of action, and then gathering the resources and collaborating with workplace parties. So how do we address the violence in your organization? So right now, we are very compliant. If you do have the certificate of recognitions, then you do have some policies and procedures in place. You do have the plans. But do you have the particular components in that program to actually protect all your workers against all the types of violence, right? So again, this is evidence-based and validated. So we would recommend for you to build your workplace violence and harassment prevention program if you don't have one, or review your own using our tools that we have adapted. You can either go self-directed, so you go to our website, check the tools out, follow the 5 steps, and if you have questions, just reach out to us. Or we can do a CCSA guided support where we would sit with you and meet with you, and then figure out each tool and what this 5 steps look like for your organization and your facility. So yes, to reach out, and that's it. Thank you. And if you have questions, just email us at ohs@ab-ccsa.ca, which you see here at the bottom. Follow our social media and subscribe to our newsletter. And I won't be here this week, but I will be back by next week, so you can kind of reach out to me as well. if you do have questions. Thank you, and have a good enjoy the rest of your day.